Okay, so this is gonna be just, I'd like to show you how to, I know that you already probably knows this, especially when you took my Python class, you know how to develop the Python code really well, but let me just review a couple of techniques, right? So let's just look at this variable and expression, right? And then let's just see the, sorry, it's, let's just take a look at this exercise 2.3. Okay. Now, so just read this program. Write a program to prompt the user for hour and rate per hour using the input to compute the gross pay. Use 35 hours and rate of 2.75 per hour to test your program, right? You should use the input to read a string and a float to convert the string to a number. Do not worry about error checking or bad user, right? So, okay, now, so first is that, you know, you have to use the input functions, right? So enter the hours, okay? Is there any volunteer that what should I do next? I mean, anyone? Any volunteer? Dan? Do you know what should I do next? Anyone? Okay, anyone?
Print the hours.
I mean, yeah, so what is the next line that I should, what is the next line? So maybe rate, right? Is equal to input, right? And then what? Enter what? Rate, right? And then what's next? So then you have to compute what? Gross pay, right?
Yeah, the hours times 3. Float.
Yes, so you know what? Okay, so first of all, okay, now let me just finish writing this code, okay? Then you can take a look at it later. So let's say, since they ask you to compute the gross pay, right? So I'll just say gross pay, GPay, right? Is equal to, let's say, hours and rate. Okay? And then I'll say print. Since I have to match, right? So it looks like the pay colon and there is some space. Looks like there is some space and colon and GPay, right? So then I'll say check code, right? And right now what I'm doing is I'm hoping that everything is correct and everything will be fine. That's what I'm hoping for right now. So I'm going to check code, enter hours, and they ask you to enter 35, right? If you read the problem, they say 35. So I'm going to say enter, okay. And the rate is 2.75, right? 2.75. That's what the this problem says, right? The rate of 2.75. Okay. Oops. And they say type error, cannot multiply sequence by non-int. So what is my problem? So what is my problem?
You didn't change it to a float.
Yes. Okay, good.
Should it be at the input or at GK?
Okay, so here's the thing. When you have this problem, right? I mean, I know that this is, by the way, this is a toy example. This is a toy example, okay? But of course, I'm just wants to illustrate my my point just by using this small toy example. Okay, so the first problem, the first thing that I want you to do, I want you to really focus. This is something you should be in your mind. Okay, simple. One step at a time. Okay, just one step, the baby step. Okay, that means you write one lines of code and then you compile. Okay, so then if everything is fine, then you move to next step, meaning that you add one more line, maybe a couple of more lines, then compile. Okay, instead of after you finish writing everything and then you're hoping that everything will be correct, and then you just click this check code, and then whenever you see an error message and then say, oh well, I'm confused, I have a problem, so you'll be in the panic mode. So that's not what you should do. One step at a time, meaning that one line at a time. Okay, baby step. So in this case, right, I'm not gonna really, okay, so what I'm going to do is instead hours, right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to print HRS and then see what happens. Okay, and you know what, for this one it's for debugging. Okay, meaning that delete this after everything is okay. So this is just strictly for the debugging. Okay, so check the code, enter 35, right? Good. So everything is good, right? So this is something that you expect. Now, what is the next step? The rate, right? So the rate is input is what?
Enter rate.
Enter rate. Thank you so much. Enter rate. And then for the print, right? And once again, this is for the debugging, right? Delete this later. I mean, this is strictly for what? Debugging. So I'm gonna click check code and then 35 and then 2.75. Good, right? This is something that you expect. Now you have some confidence, right? So I'm sure that I don't have any problem up to this point. So one step at a time, right? So what is my next step? I'm going to what? Compute the gross pay, right? So first I think, okay, so I'll say GPay, this is my variable name, gross pay, is equal to hours multiplied by rate, right? And then for the print GPay, right? And once again, this is for the debugging purpose, but let's see what happens, right? I just add one line and then check code. 35 and rate is 2.75, right? Enter. And they said cannot multiply sequence by non-digit or blah 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 string on line 8. Okay, so I know that I have a problem at line 8, but at this point I know that immediately, right? Immediately I know that my problem is this line, because I have been debugging up to line number 6. So I don't have to worry about line number 3 to line number 6. I don't have to worry about them at all. Immediately I know that I have a problem with number 8, right? So what is my fix? Well, how should I fix this problem?
Change GPay's
Okay, so okay, now some people think that, okay, first of all, when the Python gets the input from the user, when I type, let's say 35, right? This input is a function which returns what? Any volunteer?
A string.
String. Thank you so much. Thank you, Dan. So the input returns something of type string. It's not a number. And that's why they're complaining, hey, you cannot multiply, string, right?
You cast it?
Yes. So what should I do? There are a couple of ways. You can use function called what? Float, right? Or int. But in this case, it's a rate of 2.75. So I should better to use what? Float instead of int, integer, right? So there's a couple of ways. You can float, float functions, and then the input, the string will be fed into an input for the float functions. This is one way. And if you don't like this, then there's another way. It is what? I'll say float HRS is equal to, and then you use the float functions, and then you put HRS. Okay? And for the rate, I'm going to use the first method that I just showed you. Right? So same thing. Some people like this. Some people like this method. It's really up to you. It's your own programming style. Right? But this is, some people, okay. But by the way, this is not correct. And some people, think that it's, let's say, right? And then, think it's like float. This is not the correct solution. Because this cannot be done, right? So this is not this is what? It's not a correct solution. Okay, so now let's go back. So now what you can do is, remember, one step at a time. One line, add one line and compile. Add one line and compile. Don't try to finish everything at once, and then don't expect that everything will be fine. There is no way. Okay? So here are the float. And then you have to have float, right? Okay, good. You know what? Even for the float, okay, here's the thing. I said one step at a time, right? So I only change this line number 3. And then I'm going to test. Check code and 35. Okay, and then 2.75, right? 2.75. Okay, so same thing, but at least I know that it's this works, right? Up to this point. So oops. Okay. Oh. I think the problem is I don't know how to edit undo, but I'll just write it. Our HRS is equal to float input, right? enter rate, and then what? Okay. And at this point, I know that this works, right? So I'll just delete this debugging. I don't really need it anymore, so I know that it works. So I'm going to delete this line. Okay. And then for the rate, for the same thing, you know, I know that it works, so I'm going to just delete this. This is only for the debugging purpose. So, and then I'll say float. Right now I'm cleaning my code, right? Float. Okay. So let's see. Check code and 35 and 2.75, right? Okay, so 9.57 is yeah, so good, right? So now what I have to is I have to kind of make this as a desired output, right? So now my last step is pay colon and GPay, right? Okay, so let's see. Now check code 35 and then 2.75, right? Oops, what happened? The mismatch. Oh. I think it's maybe the extra space. Let's see. Check code. This is very sensitive. 35, 2.75, right? Okay, good. So I don't have any problem, right? So whenever you see this green line, great update on the server, so that means I don't have any error messages, right? No red error message. So I'm done. Okay. So basically, I know that this is a very simple example. I just used a toy example. So maybe, you know, it's not a really good example because this example is just too small. But anyway, my point is what? One at a time. Just baby step at a time, okay? Just one step, then just add couple of lines, maybe one lines, and then compile, and everything is fine. Then you add one lines and compile and etc. Okay? That's how you should develop your code. That way you can easily find what your problem is. When you have 10 error messages once, then it's when your program gets larger and larger, it's almost impossible to find your bug. Okay, it's extremely hard to debug your code. So please take this baby step, like one step at a time approach. Okay, so any question? Any question? Okay, good. Then I'm going to stop recording my last announcement video. So stop recording.